Storytelling, it's Ohana, it's real family. PBS Hawaiʻi, home is here.
Local broadcasts of Insights on PBS Hawaiʻi are made possible by the support of viewers like you. Mahalo, and by Carl Smith Ball, providing legal services throughout Hawaii and the Pacific since 1857, making a positive difference in the communities where we live and work. From restaurants and salons to takeout counters and coffee shops, it seems like the expectation for tips is everywhere. But with rising costs and digital prompts at every turn, are we reaching tipping fatigue? Is too much being asked of customers to cover low wages of service workers? Join the conversation as we discuss the ethics, etiquette, and culture of tipping next on Insights.
Aloha and welcome to Insights on PBS Hawaiʻi. I'm Lauren Day. We've all been there, that awkward moment at a takeout counter or coffee shop when the cashier turns the tablet around and the suggested tip screen and the employee are staring us in the face. Do we give in to social pressure and tip 15, 18, 20%, even more, or sign the screen and click the no tip option and walk away? It seems that more and more businesses are giving customers the opportunity to tip, but what is the proper etiquette and protocol when it comes to tipping? We look forward to your participation in tonight's show. You can email or call in your questions, and you'll find a live stream of this program at pbshawaii.org and on the PBS Hawaiʻi YouTube page. Now to our guests in studio. Mike Palmer is the chairman of the Hawaii Restaurant Association and the managing partner at Ho'okipa Partners LLC, where he oversees business development, operations, and strategic initiatives across the hospitality and service sectors. Catherine Toth Fox is a longtime journalist, magazine editor, author, and content creator who has covered food in Hawaii for more than 20 years. Nicole Wu is the Director of Research and Economic Policy at Hawaii Children's Action Network. She has over 2 decades of research experience in topics such as wages and economic inequality and tax and budget policies. And Jason Maxwell is a member of the executive board of the Unite Here Local 5 Union. He's a seasoned hospitality professional, bartending at several premier establishments in Waikiki. Thank you guys so much for being here tonight. Excited to get your perspective on tipping and how the industry has changed. The scenario that I mentioned at the top of the show, I'm sure all 4 of you have been in that situation. I'm curious to hear from each of you in your respective fields and expertise. How do you feel about a person hitting the no tip option? Say it's a coffee shop, takeout, different from, we can start with you, Jason, but different from a bartending, service.
So how would you feel about someone hitting the no tip option? Now, I've been a bartender forever, so it's something that you're accustomed to receiving, but even as bartenders, in Waikiki, Honolulu is a great example. We've got a lot of international travelers, and some come from cultures where tipping's not expected or even normal for them. Mm-hmm. So we wouldn't even think about soliciting. There's hope that they understand the importance of tipping in our culture, that they would do it. But even with that, there's not anything in me or folks that I work with that would make you want to solicit the tip from them, like just, oh, you gotta, at least verbally. You hope that they would see the prompts, if you would, to follow that narrative and want to show some gratitude for the service that they see or have some understanding of it, of the nature of the service industry, at least in our country and culture, but sometimes they don't. But folks that are from here, if they don't want to do it, you can't push them to do it. You just have to kind of honor your job and honor the service that you're going to give and hope that that's something that they understand is going to be helpful.
Let me ask you a quick follow-up.
Sure.
Do you think it's a different situation, though, when you're bartending, serving a customer, making them the drink versus, let's say, a takeout place?
Yeah, I mean, I can say it's different from the consumer perspective because bartending is really unique in that they're watching you create the service. They witness you creating what they're going to consume. You have that rapport that's right there. Whereas takeout, you don't see them building the food. You don't see what goes into doing the takeout. I'm in the industry, so I know what goes into it. So I would always tend to tip something for that. But for an average consumer that hasn't worked in the industry, they might not really understand something like that. That there's still energy that goes into it, and they may not even know that you live off of tips, and that our wages and our lives, our livelihood are very much unstable in terms of we don't know what to expect day to day in terms of what we're going to make, depending on your work. So, yeah, it's understandable to see there's a difference there, but bartending, you've got that interaction that's right there. So it's a little bit different.
I want to dive into that a little bit further, but let's hear from the rest of our panelists on that first question. Maybe we can just go around next in line. Catherine, I'll go to you. Yeah, how do you feel about consumers, maybe since you have, work in the food or, in the food industry and covered it, hitting that no tip option when it comes to those types of places, say a coffee shop, takeout place?
Well, I think that's part of the sort of general complaint lately, that there's a perception that tipping culture, at least in America, is very excessive, that it's mandatory, that it's sort of migrated into these spaces that are like unconventional. Like you have food trucks or you have coffee shops, right, that have these tablets with the pre-entered tip screen. Or jars. I mean, we've all been there where you grab and go, and like you're standing there and there's a tip screen and you're like, I just grabbed like a sandwich, like you did nothing. What do I do? And there really is no rule book, right? So the way you learn your tip etiquettes from your family or friends or, or the pressure around you. And so my parents were generous tippers and I became a generous tipper. I'm also raised Catholic, so I have a guilty complex. So I end up like never really ever hitting that no tip because I just feel like, I don't know, maybe I should tip. But there is a lot of pressure. And I think that becomes a source of complaints for consumers. Like, why am I feeling guilted into tipping for something when I can't even identify what the service was that was rendered? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Nicole, what about for you?
Oh, I totally hear you, Catherine. In my old days when I was going to college and a few years after, I also worked as a waitress and a bartender, so I totally understand how important tips are when you're in those kind of jobs. And I'm not sure people know that most tipped occupations, which are like waitresses, bartenders, nail salons, they make less than the minimum wage. So for them, I think it really is kind of mandatory, especially here where we do have a lot of people from other cultures who don't tip, so we need to make up for that. But about this creep into other industries, I recently had to pay a plumber for some work on my house, and I paid online and I got to the payment page and there was a tip screen and there was a plumber who was charging me lots of money.
Yeah.
That's one of the few times I said no tip because I'm like, that's silly. But if you think about the counter, the coffee shop, the McDonald's, they're not making the sub-minimum wage. It's our regular minimum wage right now is $14 an hour. That's like $29,000 a year. I looked into the data. The average wage for a counter food person here in Hawaii is less than $15 an hour. So I think if you have the means to help somebody who's, making the coffee, I actually live with somebody who rents in my second room, works at Starbucks, gets up super early in the morning before the sun goes up, spends a lot of time setting up the shop, and then, when the shift is over, they spend a lot of time cleaning up as well. So, if you can, I think you should. I do think plumbing is like taking it too far, though.
I appreciate the honesty and the perspective. I think a lot of us can probably agree. Mike, curious, your 2 cents, especially with such a vast restaurant experience.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up much like Catherine, Catholic as well. But my dad, even though we didn't have money growing up, I always watched him with tipped help, always being very generous. And I saw how they responded to that, how they reacted to it. And I used to ask him questions, about that. Is it obligatory? And the way he explained it, kind of the way I feel it, is like, it's kind of our way of stimulating the economy with these people that do make lower wages. But I also agree that you should never feel obligated, and it's funny, I hate those devices where it's like that big move where they turn it. You almost want to hear music at that point, like dun dun dun. Our devices at my restaurant they're fixed. The customer, we can't see what they're putting in. I like those better. But yeah, I think it's people, if they don't feel like tipping, they shouldn't. If they didn't receive nice, friendly service, don't encourage that kind of behavior. But I feel like, especially if it's somebody you see every day, like your friendly barista, you're seeing them 5 days a week, or the person makes your sandwich or whatever. But I really think it depends on the individual. But I don't think the culture is going away, nor should I think we should force it to go away, because it would upend the economy, and I'm sure we'll get to it later tonight. But yeah.
Speaking of culture and economy, do the four of you think that the culture is more and more that we need to tip more often, more tip dollar amount wise, and in more places? And do you think that is economy related? Maybe I'll pass that question to you, Nicole.
I think it has a lot to do with inequality, especially in a place like Hawaii, where it's so expensive, it's so hard to live here. We have people moving away because they can't afford to live here. And as I said, our minimum wage is $14 an hour, and people like Jason are making even less than that before tips, because we have a sub-minimum wage for the restaurant industry and other tipped workers. So it is really important for us to understand that tipping is essential for a lot of workers who are not just teenagers or students. They're supporting families, and they're trying to pay their rent and make ends meet. And the history of tipping here is different. It started in the 1800s after the Civil War. It really was a way, unfortunately, for people not to have to pay former slaves a salary. So it's rooted in racism. And then during FDR's years, they put some labor laws in, and they excluded women's industries from the strong labor laws. So there's racism and sexism in our tipping culture. So it is different. In the 1960s is when the sub-minimum wage for tipped workers came in. And that was in response to, it was the civil rights movement, and the industries kind of went in and said, we don't want to pay the full minimum wage to these specific industries. If you look at them, people of color and women. So it's very different from other countries where people do make a living wage. The tips really are a little bit extra. But here we've got so many people struggling. And so again, I always think if you can afford to tip, please be generous, because we all know how much people are struggling here.
So I have a question just following up on that, maybe for either one of you. But there is some feedback from customers or consumers that why is the responsibility on them then to make up the difference for that lack of livable wage? Do you know what I'm saying? So if the employer is supposed to be responsible for providing that, then why is it that the consumer then feels obligated to provide that a little extra?
I mean, I think that's a great question, and it is definitely something we hear a lot in the industry, on the ownership management side, is, put that burden on the employer to pay them a wage that is worthy. But if you find out what, tipped workers are making once you factor in the tips, a lot of people out there that never worked in the industry have any idea. We're talking $30, $40, $50 an hour when you factor in tips for some service workers. And that's great. They can make a great living. I know there's bartender servers make $100,000 a year, believe it or not. So, to put that burden on an employer, it's unsustainable. There's no way you could turn that around overnight, and it would just be impossible. And what you'd end up seeing is robotic bartenders. You'd find, kiosks, screens that you're already seeing up here. That's what the result would be if we got rid of tipping, I'm pretty sure. So, but I know there is a rising tide of individuals that are like, in the plumber thing, that's a new one to me. But, why do we feel obligated? And I just say you shouldn't ever feel obligated. Tipping is to ensure proper service. And if you don't get great service, don't feel obligated. But, I feel like we should, or it's just on yourself. If you feel like giving it, do it. Knowing these people, it is part of their overall income.
And I would jump in.
Go ahead.
Jason, are you making $100,000?
I know. I'm like,
Jason
I'm working you at the study next time I see you.
He probably also knows like
Jason works several jobs, but
combination of drinks that most of us do not know.
Fair enough. But I will say a couple of things. Look, I moved here from Tennessee originally. To some of the points that you're raising, it's still $2.13 an hour back there.
Wow.
$2.13. That's
$2?
$2.13 is still the federal minimum wage based on the tip credit laws. Part of what I came here late 20s thinking, I might do some grad school stuff here and go back, got into the hotel industry. I'm very fond of my union. I'm a member of the executive board. What drew me to stay here was the fact that we can, as workers in those properties, have the right to collectively bargain and try to get our medical, we get other benefits. It creates an environment that's stable enough to sustain a family and such. I just noticed that from seeing guys retire as bartenders at these hotels versus back in Nashville, it's only a college job because it's only $2.13 an hour and your medical is, skyrocketing still. To this day, it was high back then, it's worse now. But to the point about what you make, I still, and I've got I would argue a good union bartending job, but I still hold 2 of them because it's unstable. The work itself is still, even here, even where we have those unions and that ability to collectively bargain, it's still not stable work. Things happen with ownership, also, and folks ask me all the time, why do you work so much? Well, truthfully, because I'm afraid that just around the corner is nothing. And whatever you're making, it goes from whatever that is to nothing just like that. And so that's the other part about it that you have to consider. It's not real stable income. And so I work my tail off still just to try to, provide a stable place.
I mean, Mike definitely was talking about people at the high end of the range of tipped workers. Yeah. I dove into the data before the show today. That's my job. And waiters and waitresses here in Hawaii make about $48,000 a year, according to DBED, our own state Department of Business, Economic Development and Tourism. And, that is below a living wage here in Hawaii. Alice, Aloha United Way, DBED, that's just about how you can make your basic needs. There are 7 states that have gotten rid of that sub-minimum wage. The whole West Coast, from Alaska all the way down to California and Nevada, pay the regular minimum wage to their tipped workers, their bartenders and waitresses. But people still tip on top of it. The industries are fine. 2 more states are going to join them. So, there are folks here who are saying, let's join those other states and, add Hawaii to that list and at least let everybody make the basic minimum wage.
Yeah. I want to start sprinkling in some of our viewer questions, and we're also getting a lot of comments. These first 2 are similar, so I'm going to read them together. They're actually not a question, but both of them are comments. Rick emailed in, I spent many years in the service industry. We'd train our staff to realize tips stand for T, to, I, ensure, P, proper, S, service. The better the service, the better the tips. What are the current thoughts on that age-old philosophy? And then John from Waikiki said tips will help guarantee better and guaranteed service. You guys agree with that?
I think that's fair. I had a thought earlier too. Anytime you're receiving some kind of service, there's an opportunity, if you so choose, to give a little extra just to make that person feel appreciated. And I should say recurring service. I've got my kid in piano, a very nice person that doesn't charge him much, but I give him extra, and it's not necessary. It's like, I just want to earn tips for a living, so I typically think I should just pay it forward and give a little extra because teaching my kid how to play piano. So there's opportunities to, it is what the person said, it's to ensure proper service. So there's opportunity, especially if it's recurring service. You got a regular that comes to your bar all the time. If I'm a regular at a bar, I'm gonna make sure I tip really well, because when I go back, I want them to know me and remember my drink and all those sorts of things that come along with getting tipped well. That's the nature of it in terms of the business and the industry and that side of it. So
and you do remember the good tippers and the bad tippers.
Absolutely. And you remember their drinks, and I can tell, before busy room, I can see them walk in, I can hold the bottle in, and it makes them feel appreciated. It gives them the service that they want, especially in a nightclub environment. It makes them feel special and seen and observed, and they reward me for it. So. And that's the fun part of it, too.
So that's a situation where you're providing a direct service,
Exactly.
right? And so to Lauren's point earlier, when there isn't much of a service provided, right? Somebody just rang up your order that you grabbed yourself, does that warrant, right, a tip? And then to your point about the plumber, I also overpay my dog sitter because she's amazing, and I'm not going to share who she is with any of you because I need her a lot. But what I'm saying is, like, I want to show my appreciation to her, right? So that's more of a thank you, more than a tip, I would say. So like, if my plumber was exceptional, came in the middle of the night and was just amazing, clean, and you know, I might give him extra money or lunch money, or if I baked something, I would put something together. So I think it's, when is it warranted? If you're making my drink and you're making me happy, yeah, you're going to get a tip. But if you've just rung me up, you know, where does it end, I guess, you know?
I mean, I personally think part of it is thinking about who's asking for the tip. And as I said, the people who just ring you up at the, you know, at the food counter, they're making on average less than $15 an hour here in Hawaii. So, you know, I tend to tip them because I know how much they make because I'm a geek and I look up these numbers. So I think, you know, even though they're not a traditional tipped industry, I know these people are struggling. A lot of them are sitting in 19-hour jobs because that's the limit to get your health insurance. So I know of people who have 2 19-hour-a-week jobs. They're making $14, $15 an hour. They cannot afford to live here. So we're going to lose more and more people. So, you know, unfortunately, that is kind of how our economy is right now. And I do remember when I was a waitress and a bartender, it's true, I definitely worked for my tips. But the flip side of that is that the restaurant industry has the highest rates of sexual harassment of pretty much any industry. And I don't know about you, Jason, it's probably worse for women. And I think about back when I was a waitress and how some of these customers really did harass me. And we women, we would just kind of grin and bear it and smile through it because we wanted our tips. At the time, I didn't really think about it. Looking back, I'm like, that is not a good situation. And if there's any way we can, you know, if that just means raising the minimum wage up a little bit to make us less reliant and like needing those tips to pay our rent. I mean, it's a better situation for everyone.
Speaking of this topic, maybe Jason, can you weigh in how crucial are tips for you? I know you mentioned earlier Hawaii being a lot more secure in the bartending field industry than Tennessee.
Yeah, I would say, and for me, I'd say even more so in the union hotel properties, to be honest, that it's more secure, more stable, and yet and still it's still basically half your income. I mean, it's very much, yeah, I couldn't imagine not earning. I don't know what that would even look like, to be honest. So it's still, and I'm in I think arguably a pretty decent situation because I'm in 2 pretty decent hotel properties. They kind of go with the trends. It's slow now. But when it's slow, we feel it too as workers. So we feel that too because there's less tip income, obviously. So it's a primary aspect of your income. So it's not even in that situation. So even the workers that are in regular restaurants and other shops and coffee shops, smaller places where the business isn't as consistent as Waikiki, because I've got a Waikiki perspective, but we've got a whole island chain, right? And different parts of the island, different levels of traffic coming through. So even more so. So that's probably where your data is very clear. It says it, that it's hard out here. And it's still just as expensive any other part of the island as it is in town. And so, yeah, it's in that, from that perspective, I think it's still very crucial. It's crucial to workers. And I heard you say generosity or something. And I think of it too as, yeah, it's gratuitous, showing gratitude. It's a way to show gratitude, maybe for a one-time issue or to ensure proper service for recurring service. And it's a way to give back. I think I'm hearing that echo, even if I'm a raised Christian myself. So that's another thought in my mind. I'd always think, okay, I'm going to give a little extra here because I didn't go to church last Sunday. I mean, that kind of stuff. But I'm going to give it this way.
Tithing your bartenders.
But it's crucial. It's an important aspect, and I say all tip workers would feel that way because that's just what you do.
Yeah. One quick comment I was going to make about that takeout too is a lot of places, and I know even our place, the counter service actually shares. They're required to share their tips. So any credit card tips, they have to share with cooks. They have to share with dishwashers. So it isn't just a front-facing person. It's usually shared amongst everybody working there. So.
And there was work that went into it. You don't see it, right? Because you just see them drop a bag off. Yeah. But there was work that went, and if you're in a situation where the restaurant does the tip pooling with all the back of the house staff, it's even more crucial then because now they're trying to help take care of everybody.
Let's see if we can get through some of these viewer questions and
There's a lot
comments. There is a lot. A lot of comments, actually. This one is a comment that touched on, Mike, what I think you mentioned earlier, and Nicole, what you had just said. Barbara's saying, I don't like to go out and eat because of the 20% tip. I think the business owners should pay the employees more so that it covers the tip price. There shouldn't be any tipping in America. As a restaurant owner, how do you feel about that?
I respect that opinion, and like I said, I think there is a rising group of people that are fed up with, that, and I think, I say some people, maybe they shouldn't go out and eat then if they go to a restaurant and don't want to tip, because that has always been part of our culture, well, dating back to when you said at least. And to change that and take it away, it would have huge ramifications and change the industry in ways that, it would just have to be, like I said, kiosks and robots would be replacing workers, college students, people that have been servers, bartenders their whole lives would have to look elsewhere for work, because restaurants and these places cannot take on the higher labor costs that they'd have to replace that are currently coming from tips.
I was going to say, are there even enough margins in the restaurant business?
Every year they get lower and lower. And 20%, I said, don't tip 20%, tip 10%, tip 5%. But it's really, the individual, the consumer's kuleana to do what they feel comfortable with. And I want to go to a full service restaurant and not tip at all. Counter service, like I said, I don't think people should feel obligated, but I think everybody here at this table, we're tippers. In college, I was bagging groceries at a grocery store. And in that college town, there was so much labor force that I was rapidly going into debt. And I was trying to get a job at this busy restaurant. And I tell people that was life-changing when I got that job as a busboy. I would have had to drop out of college. I got this job, and it changed my life, because now instead of getting $3.35 an hour, I think it was at the time, I was paying union dues too, so that took some of that. And then I got a busser job. 7 months later, got promoted to a server, and I was able to stay in school. I was able to pay my bills. I was able to pay my tuition. And it was life-changing,
And in Hawaii,
sorry. I mean, there are 7 states that do pay the full wage, right, for workers who get tips as well. As I said, Alaska all the way down to California and Nevada. And their restaurant industries have managed to figure it out and survive. And I don't know how many of you have been to other countries where there is no tipping, right? And I have to say, this is a lot simpler, especially when you're dealing with foreign currency, that you look at the menu and you know the amount it is. I've been to some restaurants in this country, in other states though, that they have a thing on the menu that says, you don't need to tip because we've added it into the cost of the menu. Tip if you think you have extraordinary service. But I do think, a lot of these restaurants are kind of struggling because people are so not used to it. But it would be a lot simpler if we got to that point where, that extra money was just put into the prices, and then we wouldn't have to hustle for tips the way that we do.
Nicole, this question I think is maybe best suited for you, but everybody else feel free to weigh in. Kappa from Eva Beach is asking, since Trump is not taxing tips, is there a difference in the amount of tips received or given?
Right. Well, I'll let Jason also answer it. But one thing about that is tax on tips is just for your income tax. It's not for your Social Security or FICA Medicare tax. So it's literally just for the personal income tax. And most people who wait tables don't make a whole lot of money, so they're not paying a lot in personal income tax. And there's a cap in how much of that no tax on tips is. So there's only a certain amount that's getting shielded. So it's not as progressive of a policy as it might sound like when you just hear it. It's probably better just to raise the wage, honestly. But I want Jason to think.
Yeah. You said it very, very kindly, very nicely. I can't even put my words together that well, but I would just say sometimes political language, political speak has its own agenda, and it's not necessarily true. The word no tax on tips is the quote, or whatever the bill is called. And yeah, my tips are still taxed. So, I mean, there was an era where there was truly no tax on tips. You had to claim, but when people paid cash mostly, you could get away with, oh, okay, so much cash, and what you see on the line with the credit card. Now it's 90%, probably more than that. Everybody uses a credit card now, so you don't see cash. So all of that, it's definitely taxed. So that phrase, no tax on tips, has no bearing on anything, it has no bearing on my life. It's just a word that I heard a politician say, and it's got nothing to do with my reality. I'm still taxed on everything. And so I think coming up, well, when we do our taxes this year, there's that small percentage you can claim to try to get a tax break, like having my understanding of it, and it could be, and you could correct it. If you have multiple kids, the more kids I have, the more tax break, but something similar, but it's a small amount. It's really not relevant to, you're getting taxed on your tip still. So if there was a true tax-free tip thing that could happen, but I know that they would never do it, even though they can make it sound like they are, it would be great. But I think it was just political language used to make people think something's going to happen that did not happen, and I don't think would actually ever happen. My own opinion, but yeah, that's not a reality for us right now.
Interesting insights. I'm going to read these two questions. I think they're kind of related. And I'm actually not sure who's the best person to weigh in. Jason, it might be you from the union, but Bernice in Hawaii Kai is asking, what about valet drivers? Are they in a so-called tipped job? Are they even paid at all, or do they survive on tips? When the valet parking is $10 or more, like at some hotels, a tip increases the cost. And then another person asked, besides the food industry, who else do you tip? Hair salon, delivery driver, valet, maids at hotels.
Oh, I can weigh in on some. Yeah, the charge that you're getting, that you pay the hotel to park a car, that goes to the hotel. So that's a way for the hotel, the companies to make income. So valet drivers do get tips. They're not, how can I phrase it? Yeah, they sub minimum wage as well. Like, they don't get the full minimum wage. They're categorized as, in our contracts, to be honest, they're categorized in this sort of different gray area that's not necessarily like a server, but it's not non-tipped. It's somewhere in between, but it's still not tipped, fully tipped. So they definitely rely on your tips. As those prices go up, the hotels just take more money, and we advocate for trying to get some of that to the valet workers through our contract negotiations, but that's not always successful. I'll just say it that way. So, yeah.
Nail salon workers, also tipped workers. I looked into the data. Here in Hawaii, they're making about $14 an hour. That's $29,000 a year full time. So please tip them. And some of the other ones, like delivery drivers, Uber drivers, they're in a weird category. A lot of them are basically considered independent contractors, right? And so I actually, before I moved to Hawaii, I was looking into some of this new industry, Uber. It was about 10, 15 years ago. And when they added up all their costs of their gas and the amount that Uber took from them and maintenance, some of them were making less than minimum wage by the end of it. So again, that's another industry where you probably do want to tip if you really understand how little they're making at the end of the day.
I think there's just like lack of transparency. It seems, especially from questions that are coming in, that people just don't understand what people make. They don't understand where the tips go, how they're distributed. And so when you create this confusion, and it's not on purpose, but that's why consumers don't know what to do. Like, who do I tip? How do I tip? Where does it go? And so I think, I don't even know how to solve this.
The frustration is so understandable.
Yeah.
And, I personally think, like, let's just pay everyone, like, a good wage and just make it simpler. I mean, some other countries literally just do that, right? The tipping is not in the culture. And I remember going to like Australia and like asking, somebody who was waiting a table on me, and they were like, what? And they were like, oh, no, I make enough. And I was like, oh, it's so different here,
Catherine, on your point, let me read these two comments, because it's exactly what you flagged about transparency and confusion of where the money is going. These are both YouTube comments, and we're getting a ton of comments, as you guys can see. $1.20, quote, kitchen appreciation automatically added to my brunch at a local Maui restaurant before tip options. I don't eat out very much, so I didn't mind. This person says, I feel like I've been seeing service and kitchen fees more and more. I always remove or lower my tip when I see that. And I've seen a couple other comments, but I can't find them because there's so many right now. Similar topic, similar comment. Do you think that restaurants should be maybe more transparent of those fees to encourage customers to tip their employees? How do you guys feel about that?
Well, I think there's actually a law that says that it has to be written on the menu somewhere that there's going to be a kitchen fee or something like that. Yeah. And that goes to the guys in the kitchen who are not out at the front of the house making the tips. So, if you do reduce your tips, you're taking that away from the server, and, that's your decision, but just know that that's what you're doing. But yeah, I mean, I agree. It's frustrating. It's really difficult to understand where all this money is going and why all these fees are popping up.
As you were just mentioning that, I found the comment and question that I was looking for. Dawn from Kaneohe said, do some restaurants have tip sharing with the kitchen staff too? Maybe Mike, you can weigh in on this. I never know if my tip is just for the server who might provide mediocre service or if it's for the whole experience.
That is a great question. And again, communication, right? And a lot of people not understanding how it works. I would say most restaurants, it really depends on the owner. The owner can create, or the HR department, if they're a bigger company, can create the tip policy for the workers. The workers then sign and agree to it because it is, their tips they're receiving. Like I'm sure you have to agree how the tips are distributed, but it's spelled out, this percent goes to the dishwashers. This percentage goes to the cooks. This percentage goes to the bus staff. This percentage goes to the food runners. I mean, there's a lot of people, right, in a full-service restaurant, 5 or 6 other positions that help get your food to you and the whole, thing. So I think that's a great question, and the answer I would say is yes in most cases, but you don't really know unless you ask the manager or the server, and they'll usually be transparent and tell you how their tips are distributed. But yeah, they don't, if you're tipping a server $20, they might get half of that. They might get 75% of it. They might get 80% of it. So
would you recommend that that's a good practice to ask your server how much of the tip they will actually get to keep? I
think if you're curious, by all means, and I do know we talked about all these fees being added on, and I know that's really, I think that's what's compounded the issue of people being apprehensive about tipping, because now it's got tips, and now you've got kitchen service fee, you've got all kinds of fees now being put on, checks for restaurants, and I get it, I get the frustration. But as you said, it's a law by the Consumer Protection Agency that you have to have that spelled out, very visible on a menu, on a screen menu, or on the POS itself where the customer can see it.
I will say there's been many times where I've had an amazing server who goes above and beyond. I think of one experience recently at Olive Garden. He dumped out a handful of the chocolates afterwards. That's a situation in which you want to tip more, but you want to make sure that they're going to get the full tip because he's the one that, at least visibly that I saw, actively bringing the extra pastas, etc., to the table.
Yeah. And people ask even me more and more in the last few years, I'll be honest, does it all go to you? Is this all going to be yours? Do they want to kind of double check? And I didn't get that question 15 years ago, so to the whole point of the discussion, right? And, I would make the case to some extent, not for every individual owner, but I think I work in the larger hotels, we think about the corporations, the corporate aspect of it and how there's, that corporate greed, we'll call it, right? But that aspect where they can sort of shift the burden onto the consumer and, create these different ways of getting more money from guests in our hotel industry. And, got to tip, got to do, and it's less labor costs for them, essentially. And that's how they grow their businesses and such. That I think there might be, because there are some new consumer laws, I think I have seen some recently pop up to probably try to keep that from being abused as much. I do think the tendency is out there, right, to try to save labor costs and defer it to the consumer. And I think that is part and parcel of the frustration because it's kind of just happening all over. Movie theaters, now I get a popcorn now and I see a tip line. I never saw that. I love going to the movie theater and I never saw that before, but are they going to just try to stop. They're going to try to categorize these people as tip workers so they don't have to pay them the full minimum wage in 5 years. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that, in my mind, I think about. And so, yeah, you make it a part of the culture and the expectation, and then the ownership, the corporation can kind of cut labor costs because of it.
Yeah.
A little bit different than a smaller place, but I think that's part of what's going on in our country. It's like they're taking advantage of the history and the culture that we've had here in this country, right, that you spoke of. And I think there's an aspect of the corporate side, the investor class, for lack of a better word, to kind of take advantage of that history and culture to keep profits going up and pass the money on to pass the burden on the consumer.
This is a little left field, but when you talk about livable wage and people not making as much money as other industries, and just how the cost of living here is so high, and you could be making minimum wage but not making ends meet. There are other industries that are not tip-based that also make not a livable wage. And so you think about preschool teachers, you think about farm workers, and there's going to be this shift away where if I can't make money doing this and I love it, but I can't afford to live here, I'm going to go work in the tip industry, right? Which is fine. But you see how that shift is happening. And then we are, again, focusing so much on the sort of tourism-based economy or service economy, but we have all these other industries that need people too. And it's so complicated.
It is complicated, and I agree that childcare workers aren't paid enough. If you look at like the 15 lowest paid occupations, half of them are tipped workers. So it's not 100% like overlap, but tip workers generally are. I mean, there are the high-end restaurants that Mike mentioned, but most tip workers really are not making a livable wage here in Hawaii when you look at the data. And as Jason said, we're lucky here in Hawaii that we're not at that $2.13 an hour that's been there for over 30 years now. But we still have this gap here in Hawaii, and if you're a full-time worker, that's $2,600 a year. And for, most of our waitresses or wait staff here are women. Most of them are moms, and $2,600 a year, that could make or break you. And so it really is something to think about when it comes to, who is paying the wages and, how much should I tip? If you're lucky enough to be able to afford it again, I'm just like, please do.
On that note, the four of you are obviously tippers, advocating if you can, please tip. Is it, given our economy though, and the cost of living here, for the average consumer to go out and have a meal and to tip the 20% on top of that? Do you guys see the pain points that some consumers are feeling when it comes to seeing the tips on everything? Because every little bit does add up.
Yeah, I think it's costs in every aspect have gone up for businesses, not just restaurants, but businesses, including, labor is a great point. The minimum wage in Hawaii is going from $14 to $16 an hour on January 1st. So being part of the HRA, that's a huge concern of our restaurant owners. That's a huge increase. Doesn't sound like much, but when you pencil it out among 20 or 100 employees, it's a big one. And so what ultimately has to happen is that cost has to be absorbed some other way. And in most cases, it's menu prices. So, and I know we've already seen, in the last 5 years, menu prices going up. You even go fast food restaurants, you're like, how much is that? And it's out of necessity to cover costs, because costs of materials, all protein prices right now are higher than they've ever been. The disposable, the recyclable containers that have to be used are triple what plastic containers used to cost, and the business owners are taking on all of that. So, the costs just keep rising, and ultimately that means the prices have to rise. So,
do you guys agree with the argument that if you can't afford to tip, you shouldn't go out?
I do. I do. If you're going out to a restaurant where you're being served by somebody and that's their profession, then I think you shouldn't be going out to a restaurant. Takeout, not so much. It's a different. But if you're going to a bar and you're ordering a drink, I think that's how bartenders make money. That's how servers make money. So yeah, I know it's harsh, but
Yeah, and it's going to sound weird, but I think that you can find a place that's on your level where you can give something. Because part of it, just as a person that receives tips for a living, sometimes I see families pop up in front of me or groups, and I can read a room. I can tell, they probably can. They're not going to be able to afford. They can't buy the Bruichladdich scotch, like these expensive things, but they can do this well drink or whatnot. And I don't get bothered by a small tip. So they still, it's just the idea of showing some sort of gratitude, of showing something, and just sort of, because it's our culture. It is true. It's where we are now. I do think there's an aspect I agree with, getting to a place where you don't have to worry about it. But I would encourage people to still go out, but show some level of generosity, like what you can give. And I think people can receive that and understand. Well, sometimes they're trying. Sometimes people are just abusive and just want to be jerks about it. And I'm not going to, here's your tip, and they write some opinion on a piece of paper, and that's not cool. But I've seen people, I've been bartending for a long time. I've seen the 22, 23-year-old guys that come in, and they really don't have it. They're college students and stuff, and I don't expect them to give what the established business person gives me that's 45 that orders a premium. But I can appreciate that they're trying to learn and they're trying to give something. So I would still encourage them to, come out, learn. And as they see how the person that gives a big tip gets treated and they want that kind of treatment, they kind of figure it out. So there's an aspect there. I think there's we should have some sort of grace for them to learn. But they're just people that don't want to show any type of gratitude. Yeah, you can stay home if you're just that type of person. But yeah, so it's a little bit of a balance there, I think.
This is kind of related to this viewer's comment. Wish there were more options given on the screen instead of 10, 15, 20%, and so on. I would argue, at least personally, most places I go, I'm seeing minimum 20 now. Yeah. I have not seen 15% in a while.
You'll see it on the pre-entered tip, screens on the tablets. You'll see that. You can custom though. There's always a custom option.
Yeah, exactly.
So
custom.
you can always get
always hit custom.
Yeah.
But I am curious. I mean, you're nice, but and I don't tip. I mean, even you could be horrid to me, and I'll probably still give you 20% because that's just my nature. But when you do receive a poor tip, I mean, what is your reaction? I mean, or just generally speaking. I mean, I think people are curious about that. Like maybe they do want to give 10% because that's their affordability, or because they had poor service. But there is a feeling, right, that there's maybe the reaction back. Like maybe I'll never have to come here again because that person's going to remember my tip. So I mean, I'm just curious on the other end, what is the reaction when you get a poor tip?
And what is considered
and what
bad?
is considered
what
bad?
Percentage are you like, ugh?
Like 5% and a phone number, Like I'm just kidding. Anyway.
If it's 5%, the phone number's irrelevant. Anyway, but no, it's it really depends, to be honest with you. I mean, there are people that tip small that are great people. It's the same thing. Like if you have kind energy from a person, I would expect they're probably good people and they can afford what they can afford. I don't judge that, or that doesn't bother me, to be honest. And to some extent, but it depends. If you're in a high volume place, the bar that I worked for years that was high volume, you're just going on to the next person. You notice the people that tip really well, and you want to continue to serve them well so they continue to come back. And then that breeds a culture of good tipping, to be honest, if you work your room properly. Because people see this person gets well taken care of, and how do I get first in line? If there's 3 people in front of me and I can have that drink made, and
you might even use their your comp tab on them if they're a regular that tips well.
Yeah, you kind of there are ways you figure things out to sort of show the room that we appreciate getting tipped well if you can afford it. But there are kind people that can't afford it, and I don't. For me personally, I don't get upset at them if I can read that they're a kind person that just first time out or that type of stuff. But there are recurring people that have terrible attitudes and they come back and they constantly leave nothing, like those type of, you don't feel good about seeing them, but you're still a professional. And that's the good thing about Hawaii. It's part of our culture here. The industry is so prevalent here, and people in Hawaii are kind in general. You don't necessarily show it, that you don't enjoy seeing them come, to be honest, but it's in the back of your mind. You know the ones that don't give you anything regularly and the ones that take care of you regularly. And then everyone else kind of falls in between. You just treat them well and give good service.
And I both tended bars and waited tables. And I have to say, when you wait tables, it's a longer interaction.
Yeah.
Right? And one of the reasons that large parties often have an automatic tip is, there were times where I would work a large table, 8, 10 people. It's taking up almost my whole shift. I can't really, right? And then sometimes you get almost no tip and you feel insulted. And also you're like, oh crap, rent is due on Saturday or whatever. And so that's part of the why, like for large parties, they do that. And so, that is a thing. Like if somebody's like as a former server, if somebody's spending a lot of time with me and I happen to be buying like the cheapest thing on the menu, I might tip more than 20% because it's still the same amount of time for that server.
That's right.
Right? If I'm ordering all of the most expensive things, I don't feel like I have to like make the percent as high, although I tend to tip well because I used to be a server.
I think people don't know that. So that sharing that, I think, is insightful. Yeah.
And usually when you work a large party, it's at the sacrifice of giving up other tables so you can attend to that large party.
That's right.
So that is something you'll see in a lot of menus that is either parties of 6, some restaurants it's 8 or more, is an auto gratuity, which is pretty common these days, I think.
Yeah, because it's their time. I mean, this is people's jobs, right? Think about going to your job and just not making the money that you thought you were going to make that day because one of the people that you interacted with just decided, right? They were in a bad mood, whatever.
Yeah, that's right.
You don't have that in other industries. So it's just something good to think about.
And that's what makes it so unstable. I mean, it can be a good industry here. It can be a fruitful job. It's been good to me, but it's not stable necessarily, right? That's the big thing.
What do the four of you feel is a good amount to tip when you're in a restaurant, full service, versus, let's say, just a coffee shop?
I mean, 20% is a good amount in a restaurant,
20%?
I think. Yeah. I mean, for me, as a bartender, I would tell the people that trying to learn and people that aren't from our country that are asking, I mean, I would just tell them, look, if you leave $1, I'm not going to be insulted because you don't know, but you're at least showing something. But if you want to leave more, then I'm going to feel the gratitude and appreciate it. But the ones that would ask, we typically don't just tell them, but if they ask, we tell them.
Yeah.
But yeah, coffee shop, I typically think the 15, but dinner, at least the 20, and then you go above. I mean, I work for tips for a living, so I tend to go over the 20%. But I think for most folks, to feel good and feel like you at least contributed, and did your fair share, 20, I think is fair. I mean, I think that's fair.
I think it used to be considered 15% was the baseline, and then if you get great services, 20. But certainly in the last decade or two, I think 20% is almost more like the baseline. And again, it just depends on the individual, I think. Going to the custom button, which I'm glad you brought that up, is I think a lot of people don't know that button exists, but look for it. Every place should have it. If you're getting your cup of coffee, I always hit the custom button, and it's like $1 or $2. I'm not 20 or 25% on something that isn't full service. So I think people should look for that, the custom tip button.
And I do think that people who are programming these screens should keep in mind that when they keep making these numbers go higher, like Catherine was saying, you're making the customers feel bad, and you don't want to give that kind of experience. So maybe make those percents a little lower so that people don't start having the reaction, right? Because you want people to walk out of your establishment feeling good. And if their last interaction is a tip screen that started at 20,
that's right.
It's probably going to make them have a bad taste in their mouth, right?
Do the employees get to keep more if it's a tip that's cash versus if it's a tip on a credit card?
How should I answer that technically?
Right.
I think we're supposed to always claim all our tips. I should say it that way. But to be honest, these days, I mean, if that's a question about cash, people still really do enjoy cash. I will say that. Like, to be fair, like, be honest, we love cash, but we just don't see it that much. Nowadays, I'm like, oh, cash, whoa.
Yeah, the law states, or the IRS says you got to claim 100%, and all companies back that up. But we don't necessarily monitor the cash that's taken in. So it's on the employee to, say I receive $50 in cash tips, and then that falls under that tip policy of the percentage that's being shared. But like you said, it's much less common to get cash tips now, and it's the employee doesn't have to claim it, but they're supposed to claim it.
I know service providers that now offer their Venmo.
Oh yeah.
Instead
yeah,
of
I've seen
I'm
that.
glad you brought that up.
Yeah,
That's
instead of
so
receiving a
true.
tip, they'll say, here's my Venmo, you can tip me this way. Tour guides do that. I mean,
That's
I've
so true.
seen, and salon workers have done that too. That's interesting.
Yeah, that's
And
true.
technically, they're supposed to still report those, but I remember those days myself.
So Venmo's the new cash, I think. Yeah, that's a good point to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I truly think we could probably do another back-to-back hour on this topic. There's so many of you who have written in questions, a lot of comments. I only have like 30 seconds left, so I want to read just some of the comments. We're not going to have probably time to address some of them. There's just such a wide variety of comments. Valet parking fees and validations don't include tips. Tip your valets. This one was interesting. Someone on YouTube said, in Japan, where you don't tip, the servers, cooks, and staff work so incredibly hard, and it's satisfying for the customer. This is so ingrained in the Japanese work ethic and something that's missing in the USA because everything is tip-driven. And then this one person is also saying, this is such an important conversation and something that more people need to be discussing. Thank you for your insights. So. On that note, I just want to thank the four of you. I think we probably need to schedule a part 2 to answer everybody's questions.
Yeah.
And on that note, thank you all to our viewers for tuning in, for writing in all of your questions. Our guests in studio tonight, we have Mike Palmer, Chairman of the Hawaii Restaurant Association, and Nicole Wu from the Hawaii's Children Action Network, journalist Catherine Toth Fox, and Jason Maxwell from Unite Here Local 5. Next week on Insights, the holidays are upon us with all of their trappings. While it is a time for connection and joy, they can also be a time for stress and overdoing it. Join us as we try and unwrap the holidays. I'm Lauren Day for Insights on PBS Hawaiʻi. Have a great night.
Local broadcasts of Insights on PBS Hawaiʻi are made possible by the support of viewers like you. Mahalo, and by Carl Smith Ball, providing legal services throughout Hawaii and the Pacific since 1850.